In the beautiful village of Ifanyi lived a couple named Sarah and Toby. Their marriage was far from perfect, nor was it one to be admired by others. Yet Sarah, a young and beautiful woman in her early 20s, had married Toby from a neighboring village with a heart full of hope and the willingness to make their marriage work. She believed she could transform Toby into the responsible, loving husband she had always dreamed of. Every morning, before the first light of dawn painted the sky, she would wake up and perform all her household duties, tirelessly ensuring everything was in order. Then, with her chores behind her, she would head straight to the farm. From morning to night, she toiled under the burning sun, her hands blistered, her body aching, yet her spirit never faltering. She hoped and prayed that one day her husband would feel remorse for his neglect, that he would finally see the effort she put into their home and join her in building the life they had promised each other. But Toby's mind was elsewhere, lost in the taverns and the company of friends, far from the responsibilities of home. Walking back in the darkness after a long and exhausting day, Sarah would sit in their dimly lit kitchen, a small lamp flickering by her side. Memories of happier times flooded her mind, filling her heart with a deep, aching sadness. She knew, deep down, that she had made a terrible mistake by marrying Toby. The realization settled heavily on her shoulders, but each time the thought crossed her mind, she forced herself to think positively. Marriage was a commitment, a vow she had taken with all her heart. She clung to the hope that one day, her husband would change. She told herself that his coldness and neglect were only temporary, that one day he would see her for the devoted wife she was and love her as she deserved. With a heavy sigh, she wiped away her tears, whispering to herself in the darkness, "One day, he will surely change." That night, Toby had not come home, lost in his usual routine of drinking and chasing after other young single maidens. While Sarah stayed home, dutifully caring for their household, he was out, laughing and flirting, helping other women carry their water pots and gather firewood. Each time Sarah saw him at the stream, balancing another maiden's pot on his head while she struggled with a larger one on her own, tears pricked her eyes, slipping down her cheeks despite her efforts to hold them back. She didn't expect Toby to carry her water pot or sweep the floors with her. She knew that love couldn't be forced and that actions born of obligation meant little. But as she sat in the dim light of their small kitchen that night, the shadows from the flickering lamp dancing on the walls, she couldn't stop the questions from bubbling up in her mind. Why couldn't he treat her with the same kindness he showed to strangers? Why was he never home? What had she done wrong? When Toby finally stumbled through the door, his breath heavy with the stench of alcohol, Sarah knew she couldn't keep quiet any longer. Mustering all her courage, she asked, "Why do you treat me this way, Toby? Why don't you stay home with me? Do you not love me?" Toby's eyes narrowed, and he let out an exasperated sigh. All he wanted was some peace, not his wife's nagging. He grabbed Sarah roughly by the arm, his fingers digging into her skin, and hissed, "You want to know why? It's because you can't give me a child. That's why I can't love you." Sarah's heart sank. She stared at him, disbelief and pain etched across her face. "But you're never here, Toby," she whispered, her voice trembling. "How can we have a child when you're always with someone else? How can we even try when you avoid me like a stranger?" Her husband's face twisted in anger. "So now it's my fault, is it? You're blaming me for your barrenness," he snapped, his voice rising. But Sarah shook her head frantically, tears streaming down her face. "If you have nothing more to say, then shut up and go to sleep," he barked, turning his back on her, his breathing ragged as he tried to contain his fury. Sarah lay beside him, her heart heavy with sorrow. She stared at the ceiling, wondering what she had done to deserve this coldness, this cruelty. Their marriage was not even a year old, yet Toby had already turned into someone she barely recognized. He was a stranger with a face she once adored. Now, as he blamed his behavior on the absence of a child, she couldn't help but wonder, was this really about a baby? Or was their love destined to fail from the start? She thought back to their first weeks together, when he was already pulling away. Had their love ever truly existed, or had it been an illusion all along? The next morning, She woke up even earlier than usual. She had barely slept the previous night, her mind restless with troubling thoughts. As she lay awake, she found herself thinking of Ifanyi, the rich merchant's son who had asked for her hand in marriage long before Toby appeared with his proposal. She had already decided she could not marry Ifanyi, as his father had loaned her father a large sum of money that he died without repaying. The merchant had threatened both Sarah and her mother, becoming the source of many sleepless nights. Only through her hard work, combined with selling one of her late father's farmlands, was Sarah able to gather enough money to pay off the debt. The villagers admired Sarah's strength and resilience. Her tireless work earned her the reputation of being the hardest working woman in the community. Ifanyi had befriended her and her family, expressing his intentions of marriage, but to Sarah, he was the last man she could ever imagine marrying, especially after what his late father had put them through. She longed for a man with whom she could work hard and build a future, and that man was Toby. Ifanyi's future was already secured by his father, a notoriously cunning and ruthless man. Although Sarah sensed that Ifanyi's intentions toward her might be sincere, she knew that, in his life, she would never be seen as an equal. The shadow of his father's cruelty hung over him. She feared Ifanyi would eventually see her as a beggar, or worse, a servant, just like his father did. That day, after returning from the farm earlier than usual, Sarah was making her way to the house when she overheard voices coming from the backyard. Her heart sank as she recognized Toby's voice, animated and laughing. He was talking with his friends. As she quietly approached, staying out of sight, she caught fragments of their conversation, each word a dagger in her already wounded heart. His friends questioned why Toby was going around telling young maidens that his wife was barren when, in reality, he was the one who never spent time with her. Toby laughed provocatively and said, "If she gets pregnant, who will then toil in my farmland and sell my produce at the market? I married her to work for me, not to start a family. She was praised for being the hardest working maiden in her community, and that's why she's here, not to start dreaming of having children with those strong, rough hands of hers." His friends shook their heads, telling him he was wrong for treating such an innocent woman so cruelly. But Sarah, who was listening from a distance, felt tears well up in her eyes as she balanced the heavy basket of cocoyams on her head. Regret flooded her heart as she realized the truth about her husband's intentions. All her hopes and dreams of building a loving family with Toby were shattered in that moment. Wiping her tears away, she took a deep breath, steadied herself, and approached them, humming a song to mask the pain she felt inside. She treated Toby and his friends with feigned cheerfulness, pretending she had heard nothing, then quietly slipped away to her kitchen. But as she sat there, alone, the words she had overheard echoed in her mind, and the weight of her marriage felt heavier than the basket she had carried. From that day forward, Sarah decided she would live for herself. She had done everything to fix her marriage, but realizing it had been a sham from the beginning was devastating. The next morning, she slept until noon, still lying beside her husband. Toby, initially shocked, asked if she was sick, but she calmly replied that she wasn't. He took a quick bath and left the house, assuming his wife would soon head to the market to sell their goods. But he was wrong. That afternoon, as Toby returned home with his friends, he found Sarah lounging around the house. Although she had cleaned, she hadn't cooked anything, leaving him and his friends hungry. His anger flared as he looked at her, wishing he could beat her, but her expression remained unreadable, showing no hint of remorse or fear. She was no longer the obedient wife he had married. As the days passed, Toby didn't change his ways, continuing to chase after every woman he set his eyes on, while Sarah became the subject of gossip in the village for no longer catering to her husband's every need. When Toby could no longer tolerate what he saw as Sarah's newfound laziness, he decided it was time to send her back to her people. It was clear she had seen through him and understood his true purpose for marrying her. There was no point in keeping her around any longer. The villagers noticed Sarah's changed behavior toward Toby. The older women rejoiced, saying, "At last, the young woman's eyes have been opened." Others commented, "Toby married this girl just to make her his slave. It's good she finally realized the truth." One morning, Toby angrily packed all of his wife's belongings and took her back to her family, demanding his bride price in full. To his surprise, while her uncles struggled to gather the money, Sarah calmly offered to pay him back the entire amount herself. Her words shocked everyone, including Toby, who stormed off in anger, returning to his village with his money. When the people heard of Sarah's failed marriage to Toby, they were filled with sympathy. How could such a beautiful and charming woman have endured such mistreatment, living as a slave in her own husband's house? Some whispered, asking why she hadn't tried harder to make her marriage work, why she had chosen to repay the bride price instead of finding a way to please her husband. Who will marry her now? They murmured in the streets and marketplaces. Who would want a divorced woman, no matter how beautiful? Yet Sarah walked with her head held high, knowing that she had reclaimed her dignity and freedom. Her heart was bruised but not broken, for she had chosen her self-respect over a life of servitude. She was determined to start anew, no longer bound by the chains of a loveless marriage. When Ifanyi, the rich merchant's son, heard of Sarah's failed marriage to Toby, he decided to pay her a visit. He wanted to see how she was doing and offer some words of encouragement, considering the rumors circulating around the village. Although he had never wished for her marriage to fail, he couldn't help but see it as a sign from the gods, perhaps trying to unite them after all. Witnessing how Sarah had courageously returned her own bride price to reclaim her peace, Ifanyi's admiration for her only deepened. She had shown incredible strength and self-worth, picking up the broken pieces of her life and vowing to move forward. When Ifanyi arrived at Sarah's house, he found her in the kitchen, cooking dinner. She was humming a beautiful melody he didn't recognize, and it struck him how much she had endured. She had lost both her parents, leaving her an orphan, and now she had freed herself from a loveless marriage. Deep down, Ifanyi knew Sarah might have reconsidered his marriage proposal back then if not for the terrible way his father had treated her family. His father's actions had cast a shadow over his own intentions, tainting his genuine affection for her. As Sarah noticed him from a distance, her heart skipped a beat with a flicker of joy, but memories of the past quickly replaced it. Her face hardened as she approached him. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion, implying she wasn't pleased to see him. Ifanyi simply smiled. "I went to check my traps and found this fine piece of meat," he said, holding up a freshly caught animal. "I was wondering if you might want to buy it." His words shocked Sarah to her core. At first, she thought he was trying to tease her, but the anger in her heart softened when she realized he had come with good intentions. "Since when did you become a hunter? And now you sell your game too?" she asked, her heart bubbling with laughter. "Well, something inside me said you might offer a very good price, so why not?" he replied with a grin. Sarah and Ifanyi chatted late into the night in her late mother's kitchen. As they talked, she realized he was one of the most genuine and kind-hearted people she had ever known. They shared similar personalities, and it felt like they had known each other for a lifetime. He offered her words of encouragement, speaking gently about her failed marriage. "You are special, Sarah," he told her. "You deserve genuine peace, happiness, and respect from any man." Sarah nodded, tears falling from her eyes. Finally, someone understood her, someone who spoke the words she had been longing to hear. Not wanting to make her cry any longer, Ifanyi shifted the mood with a light-hearted joke. "I hope you haven't forgotten that I came here to sell my game. You still owe me, you know." Sarah smiled, amused, and wondered what a wealthy man like him needed the money for. But his playful act and casual approach made her happy. It showed he didn't pity her, nor did he look down on her. That night, they roasted the bush meat together, Ifanyi entertaining her with tales of the latest happenings in the village since she had left. Sarah was surprised to discover how jovial he was and how much he enjoyed mingling with the villagers and keeping up with the local gossip. As Ifanyi left that night, Sarah felt a pang of sadness in her heart. He hadn't mentioned when he would return, leaving her with a sense of longing. As she lay in bed, she couldn't help but wonder why he of all people was showing her kindness after all these months. With all his wealth, he could have easily pursued the rich merchant's daughters in the village, women who could multiply his fortune. Why was he here with her instead? The next evening, just as the sun was setting, Ifanyi returned, carrying a small flask and wearing a bright smile. He walked into her kitchen and took a seat beside her as if he belonged there. "How was your day?" he asked cheerfully, catching Sarah off guard as she sat lost in thought. "My day? It was just here," she replied, still surprised by his sudden appearance. "I've been home all day. How about you?" "Oh, the usual," Ifanyi said with a playful grin. "My day was long and tiring, and as always, I found myself starving. I was just about to cook for myself, but then I thought, why bother? I could always come and beg a meal from you." Sarah laughed, the sound light and genuine. "So you're only here to steal my food, is that it?" she teased, feeling the warmth of his presence chase away the lingering sadness from the night before. "Maybe," Ifanyi replied with a wink. "Or maybe I just couldn't stay away. There's something about your cooking, and about you, that keeps drawing me back." His words sent a flutter through her heart, and for a moment, she found herself smiling, truly smiling. She realized that Ifanyi was not like Toby or the other men she had known. He saw her not as a burden or a servant but as someone worth spending time with, someone worth coming back to. Back in his village, Toby was overjoyed and feeling on top of the world. He believed he had gained much from his marriage with Sarah, enough to live comfortably and pursue his own desires. He was busy planning how to spend his newfound freedom with the most beautiful maidens he could find. As he walked along the road one day, his eyes landed on a stunning young woman approaching him. She had the perfect curves, long, flowing hair that shimmered in the sunlight, and eyes so bright and enchanting that they seemed to cast a spell on him. She moved with such grace and confidence, each step as if she floated rather than walked. Toby quickly cleared his throat, trying to compose himself, and called out to her in the kindest, most flattering voice he could muster. "Hello there, beautiful maiden," he said, his tone dripping with charm. "What brings a goddess like you to this humble path?" The young woman turned to him, a bright smile lighting up her face, and Toby felt his heart race and his manhood stir in excitement. He stepped closer, introduced himself, and showered her with compliments. "You are the most beautiful creature I have ever laid eyes on," he declared, his voice filled with feigned sincerity. "I can see you are the missing rib I've been searching for. Now that I've found you, I'm not letting you go. Marry me, and I will make you the happiest woman alive." The maiden blushed, her fingers nervously picking leaves from a nearby plant. She pretended to be shocked, but Toby could see she was intrigued. He smiled confidently, knowing his charm was working. Soon, they both made their way back to Toby's house, where he wasted no time getting intimate with her. After their passionate encounter, Toby fell into a deep, satisfied sleep, dreaming of the future he would have with this captivating beauty. However, when Toby woke up the next afternoon, the beautiful maiden was nowhere to be found. Confused and groggy, he got out of bed, only to feel a sudden, painful kick in his stomach. His eyes widened in horror as he looked down and saw that his once muscular belly had swollen, now looking as round and full as that of a pregnant woman. A wave of panic washed over him, and he almost went mad with shock. Before he could gather his thoughts, a violent urge to vomit overtook him.